Story 1. My cousin recorded the audio of a fan for 8 hours about a decade ago, and now has more than 1 billion white noise YouTube views and is one of the top podcasts on Spotify. Story 2. My brother's friend worked minimum wage jobs. Then he and his wife started buying lubricant in large quantities from overseas and repackaging it in much smaller quantities in their garage and reselling it on Amazon. Really just classic middleman stuff, but they made so much money that they quit their day jobs almost immediately and haven't looked back. Story 3. I went to high school with Bo Burnham. One day he had a YouTube video go viral. A week later, he was represented by the same agent as Drew Carey. Ironically, the kid who joked about being unpopular was suddenly really popular due to the success of his jokes. Story 4. He and his brother developed an online game where two cowboys walk away from each other, then turn around and shoot and one dies. The game was entirely automated. You could bet money on who wins, and if you got it right, you would multiply your money by 1.95 with 5% going to the house. They got unfathomably rich. I saw them race sports cars around the world. Last time I checked, though, they went to prison for tax fraud. Story 5. My uncle invented micro machines, little toy cars, in the early 1990s. When I see my uncle next, I will show him this and all the people he brought joy to. Story 6. Forgot that he mined a dozen or so bitcoins over a decade ago on his spare notebook. Remembered 3 years ago that he still had that laptop in a drawer. Story 7. A classmate in high school climbed and subsequently fell off an electric transmission tower and got hurt pretty badly. Even though he was not very wise because there were no warning signs or a fence around it, he received a substantial amount of money as a legal settlement from the electric company. Story 8. A daytime TV show many years ago about flipping repossessed houses bought at auction featured 3 people or couples buying a house, fixing it up, and selling it. One man bought 2 houses but did nothing to them. He didn't even clean them. All he did was sell them at market value and made a significant profit since the auction price was extremely low. The show edited it as if he was new to the house flipping game, so maybe he'd have a better try in the next episode, even though his profit was more than the other participants. In the next 2 episodes, he did the same thing with another 7 houses before the production team realized he had no intention of doing anything to any house. He was only there to use the production crew's contacts and have them do much of the legwork required for the show. He made over £100,000 on 9 houses while doing barely anything. The show stopped dealing with him after that. Story 9. The guy who created the $1 million website came up with one of the most absurdly genius ways of making loads of money by selling 1-pixel advertisements for $1. Story 10. Okay, so a university lecturer at my university was a deep-sea biologist. He was given a sea slug that had been collected on an automated underwater vehicle dive. In the mucus of the sea slug, he isolated a bacterium that produced a protein-digesting enzyme, which worked at low temperatures. He sold this biological enzyme to one of the big companies, I think Procter & Gamble. The whole wash your clothes at low temperatures, biological washing powder, etc., that was him. He went from driving a Ford Escort to a Jaguar to retiring in about a week. Story 11. A small-time YouTuber with under 500 subscribers, whom I personally knew, used to make RuneScape videos. One day, he decided to change things up and do creepypasta readings. He went viral and gained 10,000 subscribers after just 2 videos. Last I checked, he's just shy of 1 million. Story 12. Not rich, but my friend told me about how he went to the strip club one night downtown. He stayed until 3 a.m. and then when he left, he walked outside to find a ton of $20 bills just blowing in the wine down the street. So he grabbed as much as he could. He couldn't explain where it came from. No one was around at the time and the streets were empty. Story 13. Big lottery winners who aren't satisfied and keep buying more lottery tickets and win again. I don't mean 1 million or 2, but those mega millions types who hit 10 million or more, then play and win millions again like a year later. Story 14. A friend of a friend was at the rubbish dump with a friend and found a bag filled with a bunch of cash. They split it and he hid it under his bed, then used it to pay tradespeople and stuff. Very dodgy, but sounds like something from a book. Story 15. My ex back in high school, 2015 to 2016, invested in Bitcoin. He made really good profit, then promptly spent it on the largest amount of drugs I have ever seen in my life. I mean, stacks upon stacks of it. He rarely sold and just went through it all with him and his two friends in about a month. There are reasons we are not together anymore. Story 16. A friend of mine once struck it rich overnight by selling designer pet rocks online, complete with little outfits and backstories. It was a wild idea that somehow took off. Story 17. A guy from the United Kingdom created a webpage with 1 million pixels and put each pixel on sale for advertising. Companies went crazy over it, buying up every page. It was genius, really. The website was still functional last I checked, though all the links were dead. I think the guy ended up going to Silicon Valley and starting up Com. Obviously, a super bright dude. Story 18. In Germany during COVID, basically everyone was allowed to start a COVID test station, and anyone could go there and get tested and even had to get tested to go to work. But what a lot of people did was collect hundreds of names, family, friends, and distant relatives, and booked them daily as tested. The German government paid them around 15 euros per test. People in bigger cities made millions without even testing anyone. Story 19. RuneScape. Someone I know made millions selling and buying gold pieces, the currency of RuneScape, then got served cease and desist letters by the game makers, Jagex, and subsequently sold his company to a competitor with a royalty deal. Story 20. A friend of a friend sold drugs in the early 2010s. Some sales were done in Bitcoin. He went to jail for 5 years and came out with what was now a few million in Bitcoin that he didn't touch during its biggest booms. I suppose it took a decade, but what had seemed like a huge mistake left him an accidental millionaire and meant he didn't need to return to a life of crime when he got out. He went on to live a frugal lifestyle as a humble cryptocurrency trader. Story 21. A good friend of mine started trading stocks after retirement. He trades exchange-traded funds every day in his underwear. He does it all on his phone or iPad. He retired 3 years ago. So far this year, he's made $1.3 million. It is ridiculous. Story 22. A friend of mine used an application to create a bunch of different notebooks and diaries using free templates, then sold them through Amazon. Amazon would supply the books, print the covers onto them, and sell them while my friend sat back and got paid for minimal effort. Doesn't really work anymore, but they made enough to not need to worry about that. Story 23. Also, cryptocurrency, but I've seen more people lose money. It only makes sense for someone who won't need access to what they're investing for years. Ideally, they won't ever need it because some cryptocurrency so far goes up and down. Other cryptocurrency goes down and stays down. Story 24. A house in a low-income neighborhood caught fire. A copywriting expert who was also a community leader started a campaign to raise funds for the family, purely on WhatsApp. He raised $200,000 over 2 days and handed all the money to them within the third day. Story 25. Didn't one of the early investors and co-founders of Facebook, not Mark Zuckerberg, write a book about how fundamentally broken the current technology and capital markets are, given that he was able to amass a fortune of over $1 billion by doing just a few months' work? Story 26. I once watched a guy turn his viral TikTok dance challenge into a $1 million merchandise line overnight. He just tossed on a silly costume, danced like nobody was watching, and somehow convinced everyone that wearing a chicken suit while moonwalking was the new trend. Now I'm left wondering if I should start practicing my own absurd dance moves or just invest in rubber chickens. Story 27. Pointy hat on YouTube worked for it, but still, 2 years to a second income while working full-time is a great fallback. Many of his coworkers don't realize he makes more in a one-day shoot than they make all week. Story 28. Distant acquaintance was in China before COVID kicked in and anticipated the need for masks. Back home, he went to his bank, but they didn't want to give him money, so he borrowed $100,000 from a local drug cartel to buy a container load of masks from China. Fast forward 2 months, and these masks were worth $2.5 million. He paid back his debt and is a rich man now. Pretty bold move, though. Story 29. Became friends with some guys in college who turned out to be the founding members of Dude Perfect. He's now a regular and just won an Emmy for shows he's done for them. Another is Brittany Dawn. Just search for her online. It's a whole thing. The crazy part is realizing both these people went to the same high school in the same year in a class of about 100 people. Story 30. Someone in my close family circle made a company around cryptocurrency security. It was worth 75 million euros 6 months after and 1.5 billion 5 years later. Kind of fast. Story 31. I know of the guy who invented bomb-proof bins, like garbage cans that are used in public places. Not mega rich, but very comfortable. And you see his bins all over the United Kingdom. Probably took years in development, but once they hit the market, he got rich quickly. Story 32. I knew a guy who thought there was a market for single-serving lubricant packets, think fast food ketchup packets, but for lubricant. He marketed them to truck stops and other places where there are a lot of budget-conscious people who spend a lot of time on the road and don't want to bring a bottle of lubricant home where their partner might notice it. Turns out he was right. Before he was even 30, he had enough money to retire, more or less, and pursue his hobbies of custom German cars, fancy dogs, and mountain biking. Story 33. Friends of my cousins. Back in the early 2000s, a husband was having an ultrasound. When they applied the conductive gel on the area to be scanned, the technician commented, "This stuff is so expensive and we just go through tubs of it." The man spent a few weeks researching it and found a manufacturer in China. He spent a few weeks getting the product up to regulations, and soon he was in business. In the first year, he sold it right out of his house, going door to all clinics in Toronto. He achieved $450,000 in sales in the first year. By the second year, he and his wife quit their jobs to focus on the business, achieving over $1 million a year in sales. Today, it's a $100 million business, and he bought the manufacturing facility in China. The man used to drive a bus, and his wife was a dental hygienist. I asked because he pulled up in a new Ferrari. Story 34. Had a friend who grew up on a dairy farm in the Midwest. He started packaging the manure in number 5 burlap sacks as organic fertilizer, which is the best kind in all honesty. He loaded his old farm truck and went to a farmer's market in Minneapolis. He sold out in a couple of hours, was offered distribution shortly after, and now is the king in his mansion and old farm truck. Story 35. Selling immediately the land they inherited from their parents. It's funny and ironic how the older generation kept the land and took care of it, thinking about their children's future, ensuring they have a place, a land to build a house on, only to be sold right away because their children prefer the money more. My cousins already sold their portion of the land even though their mom is still alive, and it has not yet been fully subdivided. It was a mess. Story 36. My friend was a backyard wrestler in high school. There were tons of rumors all over school about the crazy things that would happen at these wrestling matches, the most famous probably being someone using a cheese grater on his head. I even remember when I was an office assistant, and the principal had to send a memo to all the teachers about it. He eventually ended up getting noticed by music television and was featured on a couple of their shows, including music television True Life. I Am a Backyard Wrestler. At some point, he was actually offered his own show. However, the show ended up getting canceled before they ever shot anything, but since he had signed the contract, they had to pay him for at least one season, which amounted to about $2 million. From there, he went into law school while still amateur wrestling on the side. I forget what his wrestling name was. On a curious side note, I was attending community college at the time and wound up in a study group with his mother. I had been studying with her for months before realizing she was his mom. So, he finished law school and became a pretty successful attorney. For a while, he had his eye on going into politics, but I'm pretty sure he's just teaching right now. We've kind of lost touch over the years. We were even getting flirty for a minute there and went on a couple of dates, but nothing came of it. That's the breaks, I guess, but I'm sure wherever he is, he's doing well. Story 37. Go to work for a little startup called Dell Straight after college in Austin, Texas in the 1980s. Get a bunch of meaningless future shares as a sort of welcome to this startup sweetener. Work there for a while. The company goes public, and the meaningless shares are suddenly worth a fortune. Epitome of being in the right place at the right time. Story 38. A friend of a friend found 23 bitcoins on an old hard drive in 2017, which he got for selling some magic. The gathering cards he had from high school on MT. Gox in 2012. He sold the bitcoins in 2017, then put it all in Tesla at €70 pre-split. He's dumb as a brick. I remember helping him get the coins off MT. Gox 12 years ago. For what it's worth, his magic. The gathering cards would now also be worth well north of 75,000. He bought a house for around $1 million and paid in cash a couple of years ago. Drives a top-spec Audi Q7 and smokes 5 grams of weed every day. I go to clubs with him occasionally, and with a designated driver around, he gets everyone hammered on the most expensive stuff they have available. He's a good guy, but he is completely convinced he deserves everything he has and he was bound to get rich one way or the other. Story 39. Roaring Kitty turned 50,000 into hundreds of millions with GameStop. A few months ago, back when GameStop shot back up to 80 in a few days, he was just shy of 600 million if he sold. Even now, with the stock back to the 20 range, he's still well into the hundreds of millions from a 50,000 investment.